Welcome to the Property Panel. This week we're talking about first home buyers and how to get a foothold in the market. With me today is Robert Larocca from the REIV, Lachie Pitman from Aussie Home Loans, and Nigel O'Neill from Hocking Stewart. Robert, what sort of help is there out there for first home buyers?
There's quite a lot of it. To start with, there's the $7,000 grant, which is supplied by the state government. That's been there since 2000. Unfortunately, it was $7,000 11 years ago, and it's still $7,000, so it's not really worth as much anymore. There's also a bonus you can get that varies upwards to about $13,500 if you're buying or building a new home, up to a certain value. And just recently, the state government introduced a 20% concession on stamp duty for homes $600,000 or less. So there's a range of assistance there. You can also access a concession rate of stamp duty if you're buying a home off the plan, because you just pay on the land as opposed to the dwelling that's going to go onto it.
That's not just first home buyers though, that's all buyers.
No, that's right, but first home buyers can get that too. One of the issues that always comes up though in the marketplace is, well, isn't it just inflationary, the assistance for first home buyers? And the REIV is of the view that it's actually very helpful for first home buyers, because the poor first home buyer, they're going into that first transaction in their life. They don't have the equity that the second and third home buyers have, and they're competing against them in the market often. So it's a good bit of assistance from the government, we think.
Yep. Nigel, there's also first home buyers who are investors, aren't there?
There are. There's a number of, I think about 30% of first home buyers are also investors. So everyone's trying to get in, and the earlier you get in, the better it is. So my advice would be get in early as soon as you can, and look for three things: the area you're buying in, the actual budget you have, and the actual lifestyle you're looking for.
So when you say area, what do you mean? What should people be
looking
for?
It depends on your lifestyle. So if you're a single person, inner city apartment's probably preferable, whereas you have a family, then you're looking out to the outer suburbs.
Yeah. So start with lifestyle?
Start with lifestyle. Always start with lifestyle,
right.
Yeah. Well, otherwise, it doesn't suit. I mean, it's just an investment as well as being primarily to live in for most first home buyers. So you are looking for a combination of lifestyle and investment.
Yeah. And Lachie, what about the financing of a first home purchase?
Well, for a first home buyer, if you rent a property out, it's a good idea for people who are just struggling, because they get the rent to help what they call the servicing. So generally, unless they've got a couple or they're highly paid, a first home buyer's got to struggle with the repayments or to meet the bank's requirements. So in a lot of cases, they buy a place in the outer suburbs or a small apartment, they rented it out before they lived in it.
You mean if they're buying as an investor?
Or buying whatever, as an investor or owner-occupier, ultimately it gives them a chance to get in the market. So they might put a tenant in for a year or 2 years till they earn a little bit more. Like it could be that someone's just first year out of apprentice job and they're on mediocre salary, but in the next 2 or 3 years they're going to get a reasonable salary so they can afford to move back into the property. Then hopefully by then it's increased in value, plus the repayment's a lot easier to make, so they're a good way of getting into it.
You have to weigh that up though, because the financial assistance,
in the meantime,
and the financial assistance you can get is often premised upon you living in that property for a certain amount of time. So, you know, that might be a good idea, but you would want to weigh that up against the costs on the other side of the lack of grants and also the fact you're still paying double the rent out there, and our rental vacancy rate's still quite low in Melbourne, so you can close off options quite quickly.
If you've got no savings, well, a smaller place but sort of affordable, it could be just a one-bedroom apartment or a little two-bedroom house at the outskirts of Melbourne or a country town.
Savings is critical though. I mean, that's for all first home buyers, you can't avoid the need for savings, and thankfully we don't see the 100 and 110% loans that were a big issue before the GFC, but really, savings is king, because that savings becomes the base of your equity for future purchases, and you can't avoid it, and it's an important step.
And most people would perhaps overspend on their first purchase. They actually don't realise the costs attached to buying a home, not only the stamp duty and the conveyancing costs, but also the holding costs of rates and everything else. So to actually be a bit conservative would be my recommendation. Don't go in and spend the maximum you can afford. Give yourself a bit of a buffer. So perhaps go to a suburb that adjoins the one that you really want, so you can actually spend a little bit less and have a bit of a buffer. So if rates go up, you can still afford to make the repayments. Or if unexpected costs come in, then you can afford to you can actually afford to pay those costs.
So you view it as the first step on your path of property
Yes.
ownership, not the last one.
No, and a lot of people will have the emotion attached of wanting to buy that perfect place in the first instance, which shouldn't be their intention. The intention should be for that first one just to get in and perhaps do some minor improvements, and then over 5 to 7 years they can look to upgrade, and they're on the market, they're starting to move, and they can actually increase with the value of the asset.
The first home buyers, they've got to save a genuine 5%. They can't have a gift of part of that, so it's good that they have knuckled down to save some money or some savings. It can't be from a minor lottery winner or a sale of a car. It has to be genuine 5% savings.
So most lenders require evidence of that.
Well, good question, Karina. A lot of the banks won't lend to 95% anymore, but the ones that do lend to 95% want 5% genuine savings. If you can keep the borrowing below 90% of the purchase price, you don't need genuine savings.
I think a lot of first home buyers wouldn't realise, though, if you're borrowing 95%, you have to pay insurance to actually borrow that money, which is really the bank's insurance, not the insurance for the consumer. So be careful. My recommendation would be save as big a deposit as you can, and preferably 20%, because if you get to that 20% hurdle, then you're unlikely to pay insurance on the actual loan.
And it gives you an enormous amount of power, in the marketplace if you've got that savings behind you.
Correct.
People lately regarded a house as an investment, but the losing fact of the matter, it's where you bring up your family. It's a family home, so quite often you've got a job, say you work in the outer suburbs, where you don't have to be in the city. Like if you work out in the outer suburb and there's a factory nearby and you work there, well, if you're close to the factory, who cares if you haven't got a place? So you're going to go up 15%, it might go up 10%, but you need to sort of work out what your priorities are in life, not just only investment property and being wealthy when you're an old person. So you need to live for today, not what might happen in 10 years' time or 15 years' time.
Given those pricing points we talked about before, government data shows that most of the grants are given out to people living in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, and it's probably always been a factor of, for first home buyers, is living on the outskirts, where they can afford to make that start.
And now, though, there's been a shift in the actual population going around from east to north to west, and west to southwest. So the population is shifting as the affordability becomes almost untenable for someone in the inner east, for example. So they're starting to move around and ignoring the old rules of Melbourne in terms of the side of the Yarra you live on, which is fantastic. That
corridor between the north of Melbourne and Bendigo was one in our most recent June quarter median prices showed really good capital growth. Macedon ranges, just south of Bendigo, was showing Melbourne type prices in some respects, but also good capital growth from people looking for tree change, but also because of the improved transport along there, Castlemaine being a good example.
Yeah, so travel and infrastructure is important, especially for first home owners.
Most important.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, everyone. That's all we've got time for today.